Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which time zone you're in, and welcome to WorldOregon's special event today. We're excited to have you join us to hear from the U.S. Department of State International Woman of Courage awardee, Rizwana Hasan. It's an honor to have her with us, and we will jump into the program in just a minute. But before we do, just a few sort of opening thoughts. One, this is a Zoom meeting. Ask everyone to be respectful and keep your audio off unless you are speaking. And you can keep your video on or off, that's up to you. You can post comments in the chat. We will also post links and things in the chat. And you can use the raise hand function later, perhaps, for discussion. This, as you saw, is being recorded for posterity and to be posted on our YouTube channel later, to be shared out with people who are not able to join us live. So mind your P's and Q's, as they say, because this will be shared widely afterwards. Now, to the reason we're here. Again, my name is Derek Olson. I'm the president of WorldOregon. We are a nonprofit organization based here locally in Portland that focuses on connecting Oregonians with the world. We have the great honor of being asked to host and organize Ms. Hasan's itinerary here in Oregon through our International Visitor Program in partnership with Meridian International Center and the U.S. Department of State. This is one of many public programs we do to educate our local community here on world affairs, connect the community with current and emerging international leaders, especially those on U.S. government-sponsored programs, such as our International Women of Courage. We have worked hard with local partners to create a meaningful experience for Ms. Hasan over the next several days. And again, thanks to Meridian and U.S. Department of State for their work here with this. Prior to our International Women of Courage speaking, we're honored to be joined by City of Portland Commissioner Carmen Rubio. We're thrilled to have her with us. She's going to have a short special welcome from the Oregon community. Commissioner Rubio, as many of you locally may know, but nationally may not, used to lead the Latino Network, which is a longtime partner of WorldOregon. She's been involved in politics at the local level, having grown up here, the daughter of immigrants, and is the first Latinx commissioner on the City of Portland. We're thrilled to have her join us. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you so much, Derek, and thank you, WorldOregon, for inviting me to join you this morning. WorldOregon is truly a Portland treasure, and I'm so proud of the work you do to build and strengthen international relationships and cross-cultural understanding of issues in our state. And thank you so much for the difference that you're making, which is needed now more than ever. And again, I'm Commissioner Carmen Rubio, and I'm one of 4 city commissioners and 1 mayor in WorldOregon's home city, Portland, Oregon. And I'm looking forward to the day that we'll be able to do this gathering together at Portland City Hall, where we can host you. But until that day comes, we're thrilled to be here to welcome you virtually to the state of Oregon this morning. And I know some of you in attendance are local, and some of you are joining us from other places. But as you all probably know, it's a challenging time for us locally and globally as we grapple with the realities of a worldwide pandemic, climate change, income inequality, political conflicts, and racial injustice. And like other cities, this time has crystallized the vast economic and racial disparities that have long existed in our communities. And more than ever, we look to our values to help us guide our priorities as we emerge from this time. And our values as a city are consistent with those of WorldOregon: justice, respect, inclusivity, and resilience. These values are important North Stars for us and help us stay focused on what matters during these times, where each and every choice is consequential. And today there are a few things as consequential to our existence and our well-being than the choices before us to protect our environment and also address climate change, and doing all we can to mitigate and foster resiliency. Far too long, our frontline and Black, Indigenous, people of color communities locally and around the world have been bearing the brunt of economic development that leaves them behind. Marginalized communities are often the first and most impacted by polluted air and water, endangered wildlife, and fragile environmental ecosystems, and the negative impacts of fossil fuels. And this is also very true for Portland, Oregon. And that is why a few years ago, a diverse coalition of community members and nonprofit leaders came together to demand climate action for communities that have been left behind. They created a grassroots initiative petition campaign to win voter support to develop what we call the Portland Clean Energy Fund. And this fund is groundbreaking in that it hasn't been done anywhere in the country yet, and was created through a 1% tax on retailers to generate between 54 million and 71 million a year for community investments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, invest in renewable energy projects, and create clean energy jobs. But with the caveat that they must first benefit marginalized and underserved communities. 65% of voters approved this measure in 2018, and we're now in our second round of grant investments. And this is just one local story about how we did it in Portland. And the reality is, though, that more and more communities everywhere are taking their own stand. People around the world are self-organizing to lead the fight for climate justice, environmental justice, and racial justice, not only because they are existentially intertwined, but because communities have said enough. They're taking back control and self-determining their futures. And that's what brings us where we are today. We're so very honored to have one such leader here, someone who's said enough and who has fought for a better, cleaner future for her community and the world, and in turn has inspired a generation with her passion and leadership. And that is today's award recipient, Rizwana Hasan. Rizwana is working in Bangladesh as an environmental attorney and community advocate against systems of oppression in her community. And there was no one more deserving of this honor. The International Women of Courage Award was created to recognize women doing this kind of justice work on behalf of others, women who show exceptional courage and leadership in advocating for women's rights and empowerment. And Rizwana, I'm excited that those of us here in the Oregon community are here to learn from you and honor your tireless advocacy and experience in the field of environmentalism. You honor all of us in the city of Portland with your presence today, and honor all of us in the work of social justice with your leadership and impressive accomplishments. So on behalf of the city of Portland, I welcome you to our city and thank you for all that you've done to make our world a better, healthier, and more just place. So I will now turn it over to WorldOregon's Andrea Vanessa Castillo to speak about this outstanding recipient and guest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Rubio, for being here with us today. So wonderful to hear from you, and being able to also say a huge thank you to the audience that is with us joining virtually from Oregon and from other areas as well. Also wanted to say a huge welcome to Rizwana Hasan, our International Women of Courage awardee. I want to take a moment to just say a huge welcome, give a virtual applause, and use your reactions. Just want to be able to show as much appreciation to Rizwana for being here with us today. As all of you know, we are here to learn from Rizwana this morning. And just to give a little bit of context for the program and the reason why we're here. Rizwana is here with us as an International Women of Courage awardee, and this award has been distributed through the U.S. Secretary of State's office since March of 2007. And to this day, the Secretary of State's office has awarded 180 incredible leaders from over 80 countries who are doing work, being courageous women around the world on various disciplines across the board. And today, Rizwana is here as one of the awardees of 12 who are participating in this exchange program virtually this year. And so we are so thrilled and so honored to have Rizwana here with us today. And without further ado, I wanted to get us started and hearing from Rizwana about the experience that you have brought today. So I'm going to ask our first question of you, Rizwana. I would love to have you share with us a little bit about you. Tell us about how you got started, and did you know that you were always going to be an environmental attorney?
Thank you. But before I answer your question, let me thank Commissioner Rubio for her very kind words. I have been to Portland and I know how progressive and environmentally conscious most people in Portland are. And I work with ELAW, Environmental Law Alliance Worldwide. So know a bit about how environmentally conscious your state is. See, I never wanted to be an environmental lawyer because when I passed out from the university, I was not even taught environmental law. It was not introduced as a subject in the curriculum. But I wanted to do something new. I knew for sure that I'm not going to be a conventional lawyer. So I was looking for an organization that will be progressive, that will be composed of new generation lawyers. And BELA, the organization I work for, Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association, was just founded in 1993 by a person who just returned from UK after completing his PhD. So he was working on international river law. And I joined his team. And he gave me a work of finding out all the environment related laws of the country. Sometimes it was exciting and sometimes it was getting pretty boring. For example, when I had to deal with the fishery related law, I almost lost all my interest for pursuing environmental law as a career. But then when I was sent to the field and I could connect the laws with the field level realities, then I knew that this is an area where if I stay, I'll be able to do something positive for the society, because you have got hundreds and hundreds of laws on almost every aspect of environment. And these laws date back from the British era, since 1820, but there is hardly any application. And when I wanted to get these laws implemented in favor of the communities with whom I had to interact, I thought this is something I would rather pursue. And 8 years down the road, I don't regret at all, because I wanted to be an academic. Here in BELA, I go to different platforms and give people lecture. I haven't been able to do my PhD, haven't got a doctorate degree that I really wanted to get. But I have got something in lieu that I don't really repent for not getting a PhD. So my thirst for academic is met here. I wanted to be a lawyer and practice law, which also I'm doing here. And the thing that gives me the most pleasure is that I don't have to say no to people because they can't pay me money. Instead, people who can't pay money to their lawyers, they come to me. So that's a great satisfaction. And the other thing is that I'm connected to the people. I now know my country. I've been to all the districts of Bangladesh because people come to us with their legal grievances and I try to help them out. So in the process, I move out to the fields. So it's like a wonderful way of knowing your society and your country. So I'm a trained lawyer, but now it's a matter of passion for me.
Love to hear that. And so what, over this past 20-some years, what surprises you most about the work that you do? What are some of the shifts that you're seeing, both in environmentalism and advocating for the community around you?
See, law and lawyers are not liked by most people. I mean, people don't want to go to the lawyers. They're scared of law. They're scared of the legal system. Any society, whichever society you talk about, people don't really want to approach the formal judicial system with their grievances. They're scared of the lawyers. They're scared of the process. They're scared of the money they have to pay and the mental stress. So what really gives me pleasure is the fact that when communities come to us, they want us to file their case the next Sunday, because the filing date for new cases is always Sunday. They don't want to really wait. And in this 27 years, when we started back in 1993 and started our legal case filing works in 1995, at that point of time, we would go through newspapers and find out issues. Now, we don't really have time to go through newspapers. We get so many complaints from the community. So this tells me that there is a positive force of law that we often miss. If you have lawyers who are committed towards societal welfare, then it's possible that you can use even a very rigid judiciary to progressively interpret the legal documents. So our success has been taking the law to the people. and bridging the gap between people and law.
So, Rizwana, it is no secret that the work that you've done as an environmental lawyer has really pushed boundaries of public interest law. And in the case of environment and labor laws in Bangladesh shipyards, that was the one that really got you recognized, right? In the Times Magazine back in 2009, I believe. And so you talked a little bit about the challenges as far as the community maybe not favoring lawyers so much, but could you talk a little bit more on some of the challenges that you've encountered in your profession and how are you working to navigate those?
See, the first challenge is in our society, there is a general reluctance. When you talk about the importance of environmental protection, there is a general reluctance that it's not our agenda, it's agenda of the developed countries. They have already developed, now they are talking about environmental protection. We should first develop and then talk about environmental protection. That's number one. Number two is when you deal with issues like shipbreaking, it's an international issue. It's the northern vessels that are ending up on our territories in the name of employment generation, in the name of providing your society with iron. So there is always economic argument in favor of the perpetrators, and in the political arena, you have got their strong allies. And these perpetrators, these violators of law, they, instead of complying with the legal system, find it more advantageous to get the system by their side through various corrupt means. Take the example of shipbreaking. It's the northern vessels that are coming on our territories because the northern countries don't want to break it on their territory, on their beaches. They want to save their laborers, they want to save their beaches. And they are very tactfully sending all their vessels on our territories. Our beaches are getting polluted. We have the weakest implementation of environmental and labor law in the world. Our environmental performance is very bad. Our human rights performance is not something to be very proud of. Just it's corruption that is another challenge. And this corruption is not only corruption at the local level, it's international corruption, the global corrupt system in which we operate. And the same we face when we fight against nuclear power plant or coal-based power plant. Then you have the system which is not favorable to environmental justice, and they have their own development narrative. So they are coming up with laws. There is a systematic attack on the civil society. They're coming up with laws in the name of fighting the terrorists. So they're saying Foreign Donation Act, and they're pretending as if they're trying to control the flow of foreign donation, but they are in fact trying to control your activity. Because in those laws, there are provisions that if you say anything against the constitutional offices, your license may be cancelled. So your freedom of speech gets curtailed because corruption is prevalent almost in every sphere of industrial operation. Then there are threats. I mean, when you hurt economic interests of vested quarters, they fight back, and they don't fight back as industrialists or financial player. They fight back with their political allies, and that makes things really difficult for you. So there are attacks on our personal safety, there are attacks on our organizational reputation, and there is this general narrative, and there are legal system through which they very systematically attack you. If you're opposing their development narrative, they call you a broker, someone who is against the national interest, someone who should be prosecuted. Even if you express your opinion in the digital platform, they can hook you by something very controversial called the Digital Security Act. So there are different tiers of threats, and it's not only me who is being threatened, it's also the communities I work for. There are many slap cases, the false cases being filed against them. So now I'm spending a substantial part of my time defending the communities against all these false cases.
Let's kind of dive into that kind of piece a little bit more, really wanting to understand that there's such a big piece of environmental activism and environmental justice that comes from being a part of the community and advocating for historically marginalized and indigenous people inside of your areas, especially when you talk about, being able to protect your beaches and the areas that you live on. So could you speak to what really draws you to that space? What are some of the key highlights or key challenges that brought you to working specifically with the community around you?
Yeah, See, Andrea, in Bangladesh, we are not allowed to use the term indigenous people. And this is a recent phenomenon. So by an office circular, all the NGOs, the non-profits have been directed by the government not to use the term indigenous in any of our activities. And there are groups, like the tribal groups who call themselves indigenous people, they have also been told to change that very term indigenous. We work for environmental justice, and in the process, we try to promote equity and equality. So it's very natural that the marginalized one are our direct subject matter. We find out the villains who are destroying the environment. We are at the same time finding out communities, finding our leadership in the society that are traditionally and customarily protecting environment. So in that process, we work very closely with the tribal people as we are directed to Sena. But they are historically known or called as indigenous people. So when we talk about protection of forests, we have to talk about the forest dwelling tribal communities, because our forest administration is largely regulated by the colonial law that the British rulers enacted. It's the 1927 forest law, and it is totally redundant for today's reality, for all purposes, for all intents. So when we talk about forest protection, we can't be talking about protecting a patch of forest with greenery without talking about protecting the rights of the forest dwelling communities who for centuries have been living there. So when we talk about forest protection, we connect our agenda with the agenda of the forest dwelling communities. And then we talk about their land right, because the corrupt forest department will always like to keep that tension of a tenure security alive, because that is how they do the corruption. If the tribal people come forward and say that what you're doing to the forest is incorrect, they'll say you are actually living in my reserve forest, excuse me, we are going to evict you. So we have to work with the forest dwelling tribal communities in order to protect the forest, because they are the ones who are the traditional occupant of the forest, and they know how to really protect the forest. They know it best than the British trained forest officials, because for obvious reasons, the British people did not come to Bangladesh to protect our forest. They came to Bangladesh to do trade, to earn revenue from our forest. So while their focus is revenue earning, the interest, their focus of the forest dwelling tribal community is to protect the forest. When you talk about protect the forest as part of environmental justice, you have to link up with the tribal communities.
Thank you so much for giving us some insight on that piece. And just really quick to the audience, if you have any questions that you're thinking of as the discussion moves forward, feel free to add those to the chat, and we'll get to those towards the end of the session with the open discussion. But to get back to you, Rizwana, you are one of the 12 recipients of this prestigious International Women of Courage Award. And so one of the things that this award highlights is your demonstration and exceptional courage, your strength and leadership for advocating for peace, justice, human rights, gender equality, and the empowerment of women and girls in all their diversity, right? Often at great personal risk and sacrifice. And so I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit more on the personal side. What does it mean to you to do this work? And what does having the courage to be an advocate mean in your eyes?
It's always a very good feeling. I never regret the work that I do. When I talk to my children and ask them whether they want to be environmental lawyer, all of them together will say, no, we have seen the hard work that you do. And all the sacrifices that one has to make to really fight for justice in the society. That is something they are very proud of, but they don't really want to take the onus on themselves to do it. But for me, it has always been a very good feeling, because I know that I'm doing the thing that is in the best interest of my children. I can be a corporate lawyer, I can be a criminal lawyer, I can be a company lawyer, I can be a constitutional lawyer, and I can earn huge amount of money. But what will I do with that money if my rivers are polluted and there is no fish for me to buy? What will I do with that money if I live in a city which has the worst air in the world, what will I be inhaling? So I think that anyone who is in the legal profession should at least do one environmental case in their lifetime, because that is something that keeps you going end of the day. Money has its own power, but money can't buy you everything. If you lose your air, if you lose your land, if you lose your water, if you lose your forest, if you lose your biodiversity, what do you do with the money? So I'm not saying that I don't need money. I do need money and I'm earning it. I'm earning enough for my comfortable living. But I take extreme pride in the work that I'm doing. And I tell you something, Amria. We have been working in this area for 27 years. You will see many other people filing environmental cases now and then, but you will never see a second Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association being set up, because the work is very important, but it really requires a lot of persistence on your part, and it's not financially very rewarding, but it's otherwise very rewarding. The honor that you get, the respect that you get for what you're doing is something I personally value. And to me, courage is like standing against all odds, not only with courage, with compassion, with heart, with persistence. That's how I define courage.
So incredible to hear. Thank you, Rizwana. And this work, not only ensuring that Bangladesh, but across the globe, that we're taking the steps to really keep our space healthy and prosperous, has different views depending on where you're sitting in the world, right? But sometimes people can feel so separated from the environmental issues, just for what you were saying, the issues of wanting to bring in finances for our family, wanting to be able to understand that maybe climate change or environmental issues are not at the forefront of people's minds. I'm curious, what would you tell people to look out for in the community that relate to why environmental activism is so important?
See, I don't teach the community. I always get taught by them, because they know their environment. They don't really know climate change as you do or as I do. They really don't understand what IPCC says. They really don't read the IPCC reports, but they know that there are changes that are happening around, and that is making food production difficult for them. That is making access to potable water difficult for them. That is bringing in a change in the rainfall pattern. In Bangladesh, we never thought that strawberries will be sold at traffic points. I used to bring strawberries from Western countries for my children, for them to try. And now strawberries are being planted here. Strawberries are being sold on traffic points, and my traditional plum is gone. So it's in this world of climate change, where the existence of 52 small island countries are at stake, where the entire atlas will be changed, when 1/3 of Bangladesh will go underwater, the second largest sweetwater fishery of Bangladesh will get salinated, and we will not have sweetwater fishery. Our people will not have potable water from the rivers. That is a serious crisis. I'll first try to tell them why they really need to think about environment. It's not a mere philosophical agenda. It has serious practical implication. It's not about saving a park in a posh urban area. It's about your right to food, right to breathe, right to drink. So they have to think about it, because if they don't think about environment and they think about the other things, they don't survive. I can have 100 polluting tannery industries in some part of Bangladesh, but I'll not be able to recreate a river that these 100 polluting tanneries are killing. So you have to know why you have to do it, because otherwise, without environment, you just don't survive. It's about your own survival, and that's, I think, is very important. I'll tell them why they should not be using plastic. Because it's being said that by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than the fish. We can't think of a world like that. So you have to really know why you want to do it. And I think it's not very difficult in today's reality. Greta Thunberg has understood it. We have created a very harsh world reality for her in the name of development, and she's blaming all of us for deceiving them of a safe future. So you have to do it because you have to survive today and you have to survive tomorrow. Otherwise, what do you leave your children with? Only money. That's not going to solve all your problems.
Thank you for that, Rizwana. And you touched on this a little bit, and I'm really curious, this work of, if you're not an environmental lawyer, if you're not doing this every day, this can look so different depending on where you are in your life. And so thinking about community and people who are listening in to this conversation, what are some ways that you think are very clear in advocating, starting your work in environmental justice, other than, reducing your use of plastics? What are some things on your mind that you would like to share?
See, if you, even if you're not an environmental justice advocate, and you are living in one of the most comfortable cities of US, you will be facing cyclones, and the frequency of that will increase. And at one stage, your adaptation capacity will collapse. In today's reality, you can't just sit in one city and forget about the rest of the world. Because you have to know that your food probably comes from one of the islands that will go underwater. So I would urge people to really protect the production system of the nature, to consume less, to waste less, to pay it forward and to pay it backward. We should be indebted to the nature for giving to us what it has given to us, and we should ensure that we protect it for the next generations to come.
Thank you for that, Rizwana. And my last question in this beginning session for you has to do a lot with your work. And there's so much arduous and rigorous conversations that you have on a day-to-day basis, advocating for not only Bangladeshi prosperous and healthy lands, but around the world. And so what are some of the things that you're working on now that make you very proud to be where you are, and that give you hope for as we're moving forward and seeing development with climate change and things like that? I would love to hear what are some of the things that really bring you hope inside of this work.
Bangladesh is a place where you probably never solve anything. So my fight to ensure that the toxic vessels do not enter my country is still continuing. And now this time they have sent a vessel which is an asbestos-laden passenger vessel, and it has been sent from a European country, most likely with false documentation as to waste content of the vessel. So that's one issue. The other issue is protecting 29 most polluted rivers of the country from indiscriminate industrial pollution. The other issue about which I just argued today in the court is protecting the only coral island of the country from unregulated tourism. And this coral island is the home of the globally endangered olive riddle turtle. But we are having resorts after resorts there for tourists to go and explore. And in the process, the coral, we had around 100 plus different types of coral. We have just come down to 40. So I am working on air pollution. You may know that Bangladesh has the worst air in the world. So we want the government to take strict measures, identifying the sources and regulating those. I'm also working on indoor air pollution because many women in Bangladesh are dying because of using inefficient stoves. So we have gone to the courts that these are replaced with safe stoves, and the local government agencies play their role. So anything you name, you will find that on my plate. I'm also working for protecting one very unique forest of Bangladesh. And it's not only the forest ecosystem, it's also protecting the 20,000 forest dwelling tribal communities and to settle their 6 set of rights in that forest.
It's so incredible to hear about all the work that you're doing, Rizwana, and thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions that we have prepared for you. And I'm now going to switch seats and pass it over to our programs director, Tim DeRoche, to ask you questions that he's been receiving from the audience as well in the chat. So Tim, I'm going to bring you up now.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Wonderful discussion. I want to start a little bit with some of the questions that are coming in and loop back on a couple of things that came into the chat earlier. One question that occurred to me and somebody else just asked it is, the youth climate movement has been such an incredibly inspiring piece of energy, I think, globally. We had a question of, is there a Greta Thunberg of Bangladesh? We here in Oregon have Our Children's Trust, which has used public trust laws to challenge climate policies. Have you seen a corollary of youth activism in Bangladesh or other parts of South Asia? And is there a momentum around youth activism?
The process has begun. I would still not call it a momentum, but a process has begun because the general level of awareness in people about climate change is increasing. In the coastal areas, you will see that the youth groups are really organizing themselves because they have already started facing the brunt of climate change. Their rivers are getting salinated and they're getting frequent cyclones and tidal surges. So they're losing their homestead and everything. So there in the coastal areas, you will see many young groups coming together, trying to negotiate with the government, and they're also participating in the international arena. There is this Free Friday movement campaign unit in Bangladesh. They're also doing it. But in the youth community, you see increased awareness about the importance of tree plantation, about why people should not be using plastics and polythenes and why we should be using alternatives. But young generation, now they are having environmental science club in schools and colleges. So it's getting there, but it's still not a huge movement.
Here we certainly have a stumbling block or a speed bump around people who either believe or don't believe in climate. And I'm curious, is there a movement, is there a climate denial movement in the region? And do you see a disconnect between rural and urban attitudes towards climate change? And how are these communities working together in Bangladesh?
There is no denial here in Bangladesh or in this region because we are one of the most vulnerable countries due to climate change. And most of the countries in the South Asian region, say Nepal, Maldives, Bhutan, they are MVCs. So we are not in a denial mode, but perhaps our governments are in denial mode. I mean, they do not want to rectify their energy policies. They want to stick to their non-renewable options for energy production and generation. So when we tell them to discard coal and move to renewables, they would discard coal because they're not getting funding for it anymore, but they'll switch to LNGs and not to renewables. And their argument is that our emission matters very little. But the fact remains that you may not contribute to the global increase in greenhouse gas, but you remain one of the most populated countries of the world. It's densely populated. So think about the health hazard that these coal-based power plants will be doing to the people. And these are economically also not viable compared to the renewable options. So there is this denial in the governments, not about climate change, but about their contribution to climate change. They always want to say that why should we be mitigating? But the fact that if you go for massive afforestation, if you protect your forest from deforestation, then you get better protection against climatic threats. That is something where we struggle.
So when I think about things in the region, I think about territorial disputes, migration and refugee crises. I'm thinking specifically of the vast numbers of Rohingya. How are these challenges impacting environmental sustainability and resource management and climate policies? And is there pushback against the growth of immigrant communities?
There is. I mean, it's a general thing that no city would ever very heartily welcome immigrants, particularly if they're victims of natural disasters and if they come in bulk. If it's a slow process, that's one thing, but it is like there have been river erosion and 2-3 villages have been washed away, and all the people of these villages come to your vicinity. The host community generally is not very happy. With the Rohingyas, we are having serious issues because it's not only how many of them have come, their number is also multiplying. You know, in the refugee camp, you don't really have any other recreations. So you don't have televisions, you're not allowed to go out, you're not allowed to socialize. So the population boom that we are witnessing is really frightening. And the host community in Chittagong is very resistant of the government's welcoming gesture for the Rohingyas. And the Rohingyas have actually been given shelter in the hilly forest of Bangladesh. So huge area of forest had to be cleared, had to be hills had to be raised for accommodating them. And they're also creating pressure on the groundwater because we have to provide them with potable water. So from a humanitarian perspective, I won't oppose, but the host community would certainly not be sharing my position on that. And they are even more, irritated because when they came in, the government assured that they will be sent back. There will be a process of negotiation with Myanmar. But few years down the road, it has now become clear that the process of negotiation is not yielding much, and these people are not going back. And in terms of general migration, that may happen if 1/3 of Bangladesh go underwater. One has to understand the geography of Bangladesh. We are a very small country, and we have, our capital is the most densely populated capital of the world. So how on earth are we expected to host 1/3 of the people in the landmass, in the remaining landmass that is already overpopulated? So even if you are welcoming, it's practically impossible.
So I'm curious, are you seeing, because you've been doing this advocacy and this work for so long, and it's really incredible looking at what you've achieved, but are you seeing pathways now for bottom-up advocacy and activism to engage productively with top-down decision-making? And are people meeting in the middle on this in any way there?
Yes. When we first filed the case in 2000 for protecting one river from encroachment and pollution, it was just one river. Now you see that in all the 64 districts of Bangladesh, local communities have formed their own groups. I mean, they don't necessarily come to me or go to any other environmental nonprofit. They have organized their own movement. They have organized their own campaign to save the river of their district, to save the river of their locality. And that has created a pressure on the local level administrator as well as the national level policymakers who just can't ignore the spontaneous movements of common people to save their rivers from indiscriminate environmental pollution, in industrial pollution. So yes, we now see many bottom-up initiatives. I won't claim that all bottom-up initiatives are very well connected to the top-level policymakers, but increasingly, people's movement are getting organized against industrial pollution, against river pollution, against deforestation, against contamination of your agricultural land. It is getting much more vibrant than it was 10 years back.
And so speaking of initiatives, we hear about this a lot because, as we look at, sort of geopolitical trends, China is on everyone's mind a lot of the time, but thinking about the Belt and Road Initiative, is this having an influence on policy or development for Bangladesh?
This initiative is supported by the government of Bangladesh in principle, but this is not a subject that is a public debate discourse. But with the catastrophe that we are now seeing in Sri Lanka, the whole issue of taking Chinese loan, the conditions on which we are taking Chinese loans, the investment of Chinese money in mega projects are being discussed and debated much more prominently for the last few months, as we can say.
So let's bring it back around to your experience in Portland. One of the beauties of the exchange programs and the programs that Andrea and Amy Barris in our visitor program do is connecting people locally. And it's wonderful when we can actually have an opportunity like this to look back on maybe how that experience has shaped who you are. And I would love to hear your experience and impressions of your time in Portland. I mean, did you connect with environmental lawyers here? Did you see people working on similar challenges? And is there one thing that stands out for you?
The rain, of course. I really love rainy season. Most people in Bangladesh would tell you that they like winter. I hate winter because you have to put on so many, layers. In Bangladesh, you don't do it, but at least you have to bring out your sweaters and other warm clothes. That doesn't give me any pleasure. I like rains. So when I went to Portland and it was raining without any break, that reminded me of my country. But in my country, it rains much more heavily than it does in Portland. I found the people to be very humble, very down to earth. They were aware of things that were happening around. So they were not talking about their dog and their family and their dining table. They were talking about the world. That is something that really impressed me. And this Environmental Law Alliance Worldwide, this particular group is actually a resource for all of us who are working for environmental justice. And Bella is actually e-law Bangladesh. So I always enjoy my time with my environmental law friends in Portland. Also because of the fact that they can connect me instantly to environmental lawyers from all across the world. So they may not have a particular precedent in hand to help me with, but they know lawyers, say, in Rwanda or in Tanzania, and they can instantly connect me with these lawyers. So I really like being in Portland.
So knowing what you do about Portland's history around climate and climate policy, what advice would you give to the policymakers and the leaders of Portland to strengthen our climate future?
They won't listen to my advice anyway. So what's the point not giving them the most brave one? See, I think they have to rethink the model of development. The development that they're imposing on us is not serving the purpose of humanity, is not serving the purpose of the communities. It is only creating some oligarchs in this world, and they are continuing to dominate the world economy. If we do not rewrite the development narrative, and make equity, equality, and justice the main focus, then we'll not be able to have a world that will be safe for us and safe for the future generation. It is time to tell them that what they are doing is something that needs a serious overhauling. They have to now sit and think about why Sri Lanka has reached this stage. Sri Lanka, a country that had 90% literacy when a civil war was going on. Look at the condition of this country. So that particular economic model is not working. We have to rethink the economic model, and discrimination is something that we must not in any way promote or kind of stick to. The other thing that I would like to tell my policymaker is to stop war all across the world. War never solves any problems. So I feel bad for all countries, people of all countries, where an active war is going on or where a cold war is going on. It's not for the benefit of anyone.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up, because I think it has been on so many people's minds, the war in Ukraine and how that is affecting regions of the world that we're not maybe thinking about as much. But I think about food insecurity and the fact that there are many people who are going to be affected by wheat, for instance. And is that a worry for Bangladesh that this could trigger a larger scale sort of food insecurity?
It is a major worry for Bangladesh. Although we produce our own staple, we have to transport it from the rural areas to urban areas. We have to ensure distribution of the produced food. And if the price of energy goes up, then the transportation cost goes up. When the transportation cost goes up, then the price of essential commodities will go up. The price of your staple will go up. It's more a worry for a country like Bangladesh because we are not a rich country. Most people here have very limited purchasing power. So it creates extra burden on the very limited purchasing power of our people.
Well, let's bring this back to a question of hope. We get this a lot in the work that we do, which is we look at a lot of very, very difficult and complex issues, and people always want to know where the hope is. So two questions. Were you hopeful at all about the outcomes of the recent COP26 in Glasgow? Were there things that came out of that were inspiring for you? And I'm also then curious, where are you finding hope in the work that you do right now?
The first one is easy to answer. The outcome of the COP26 hasn't really made me happy. In fact, I'm very angry, and it's a very deep sense of betrayal because we wanted a firm commitment on 1.5. We wanted firm commitment on mitigation, and we wanted firm commitment on disbursement of fund for adaptation. We haven't got any of those. They are still willing to discuss how to reset the target to 1.5 and to really work towards it. So there's no reason as to why someone living in Bangladesh would feel happy about the outcomes of the COP26. They could have killed it, they haven't killed it. I mean, that's the only consolation that you can get out of it. The second part of the question is where I find hope from. I think it's the youth, because we are passing our time in a somewhat defined comfort zone. But the next generation, for my children, life will not be like what it has been to me. They will feel the actual challenges of climate change. And that is when I think things will start to change. And the fact that in today's world, we are talking about changes, we are demanding changes in the development narrative, we're talking about justice, we are creating the basis for them to take it forward.
Great. Well, with that, Rizwana, I want to thank you for talking with me and talking with us. I'm going to turn things over to Amy Barse to close things out, take us into the day. And thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you, Rizwana, for joining us today and for this meaningful discussion. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us and taking time out of your busy schedule. And again, a huge congratulations on this 2022 International Women of Courage Award. Congratulations. I also want to thank our audience for joining us today and asking questions. I know many of you are watching this through YouTube, and just wanted to let you know we're happy to have you there. All of your feedback is very important to us, and we're going to post a survey in the chat so you can give your feedback. We hope to do more and more programs like this with our international visitors, because for us at WorldOregon, the two-way exchange is so important. And so we want to give our visitors time to share their expertise as part of their visits. We'll continue to have virtual opportunities through the spring, and look out in our e-news. You can expect our first in-person group to arrive in June. A final thank you to the U.S. Department of State and Meridian for making Rizwana's visit possible to Oregon. And again, Rizwana, thank you for spending time with us, and we look forward to rest of your meetings this week virtually here with our community and connecting you with people locally.
You are invited to Bangladesh.
Oh, yes, thank you. So wonderful, and wishing everyone a good day. And if you can wait just a minute to get this survey, we'll post this in a second here so people can go ahead and fill this out before we sign off here. Okay, thanks everyone.